Oh, yes. Tell me you have missed us. It's been 3 weeks since last we were with you. This is the 11th edition of Cocktails and Conversation. Nick Luck with you from Teddington, Southwest London. Kimberly Anderson says, so glad you're back. Kimberly, we're glad you're back with us. Brittany Earton in Los Angeles, California, and Mark Tubridy smiling and looking refreshed after the pause that refreshes, the 2-week pause that refreshes in Brooklyn. But we did have a special reunion, didn't we, while everyone else was away, Brittany?
Incredibly special reunion. We got to lead into the wedding of the century between Shona and Pete, now the Rotundos. That was really, I think, a special moment. I think you guys would all agree with me, just to be a part of that virtually. You know, times are obviously incredibly difficult right now, but it gave us all something to smile about, to witness, you know, their beautiful love, which was brought together through horse racing, which is just even more wonderful, because that's why we're all here, right?
It is. And our beautiful love, the three of us, is brought together not only by horse racing, but by a love of alcoholic beverages, Mark Tubridy.
Absolutely. Guys, I'm so happy to be back with you. I did miss this over the 2-week break. Just like you said, we had that beautiful opportunity to be a part of Pete and Shona's magical wedding. It was so picturesque, so fairy tale. I mean, I know it was a virtual wedding, but it didn't feel that way. It was so awesome to see you guys and be a part of that special moment. And I'm really excited to circle back on our Breeders' Cup cocktails tonight and give you a little insight as to the creation of those cocktails and what they look like at the beginning and what they look like now. So it's going to be a fun night.
I missed you both. This just feels like home.
It does.
And another new backdrop.
No, this I did use for the wedding. So I moved my entire setup for TVG into my room. So I don't really have a ton of space in there. So I put up some photos. Maybe I'll just keep you guys on your toes. Next week we'll be in a hotel room. So that's
nice.
Beautiful.
Request has come in for you, Britt, right there, right now.
Of course I can. Hello to Nathan. Thank you for watching. Daniel, thank you for having your 7-year-old join us. Hopefully he's not taking part in any of the cocktails. He might need to wait a little bit for that, but a big hello to both of you. And thank you for joining us. This has been a lot of fun, and we have so much to cover on tonight's show. Do we not, Nick?
We do. We have two very special guests, both of whom have been much in the news through the last 12 months, and both of whom, I think, Brittany, have quite a bit to look forward to imminently. Tom Amoss, who has been in amongst the winners at the top level very recently.
And Jeff Bloom of Midnight Bisou fame, of Bloom Racing Stable, and their runners will clash in the Fleur de Lis coming up on Stephen Foster night. That race will be on NBC on Saturday. So really looking forward to hearing from both of them, and not just hearing about the race where their top class females will be facing off against each other, but just how they got into the game, their love of the sport. We'll have plenty to talk to them about. But I want to hear, we had a lot happen this past weekend. You were live on site at Royal Ascot, no fans there. Just tell us a little bit about what that experience was like for you.
Well, obviously, without you by my side, it was a much bleaker experience. But the racing was very, very good. It was quite amazing that we've only been back in the swing since June the 1st here, and you had this fully formed and with bells on, because you had a bunch of extra races meet take place, and it's really given meaning and context to the whole season here, really. Because although everything else is in a funny place and has all been moved around, that being where it was as the sort of touchstone has meant that the season can now exist. And by sort of the middle of July, we'll almost feel like we're back on track time-wise again. It'll all make sense. So it's done us a favor in that regard, not to mention the fact that it had a whole sporting week really to itself. I mean, yeah, we had a Premier League match on the Wednesday and one on the Saturday, but really it sort of dominated the sporting landscape. So it's been fantastic, and they dared to do it, and it paid off.
Not quite the same without having the royal procession, and of course Her Majesty the Queen. But what about her runner? Remind me of the name of her runner that won.
Tactical, and this was a 2-year-old that was just stuck in the right spot to try and get the best chance of a winner. Very well backed. I don't know if Her Majesty got involved herself, but very well backed, raced in the right part of the track. Won over 5 furlongs, probably wants 6 now. really looked like a Coventry Stakes horse in the Windsor Castle Stakes. So nice win for her and for the trainer Andrew Balding. He's having a great season here. He's got 3 horses going to run in the Derby, which for him is absolutely huge. A massively powerful stable now. And
that's fantastic.
That's next weekend.
Mm-hmm. For those watching that joined us when Graham Motion was on with us, Mark, you'll remember when Graham joined us and he was talking about his filly Sharing, who was heading over there to take on a top class group, and she finished a game second. I thought she ran huge in that race. And Graham Motion tweeted after he has not gotten more tweets, texts, just any sort of response from people for a second place finish. That's how big she ran.
Yeah, she ran a huge race, and if it hadn't rained so heavily on the Thursday and there was still a bit of sort of gluey ground around on Saturday, I think if it had been genuinely quick, she'd have given the winner a bit more to think about. But the winner, Alpine Star, was very impressive. Mark, what have you got for us tonight?
Today, we're going back to the very beginning. So our first episode, we did the brand new Breeders' Cup cocktails, the Garland and the Tory Cup. But as I'll talk about later on, and Brittany, we spoke about this the very first time that we met at Santa Anita. There was quite a long process to get to the finished recipes that we have today. And so for multiple reasons, we took some kind of alpha testing and turned it into betas. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to share with our viewers that have been following along with us, kind of where these cocktails started off, what sort of ingredients were there, where was the inspiration coming from, and then for what reasons did we kind of work it down to the finals that we have. So I'm looking forward to sharing those stories, and really excited for the night.
I can't wait because moving forward, I'm sure that was our first episode. So perhaps people weren't prepared and ready to make these cocktails along with you. Now they know what the game plan is. So they are ready and prepared at home with all of the ingredients. So that should be a lot of fun. And Nick, I like how we're adjusting these shows too, as the Breeders' Cup Challenge Series is off and running.
Yeah, Breeders' Cup Challenge Series is off and running. The Stephen Foster now has become the traditional departure point for the television coverage of the Breeders' Cup Challenge Series. Obviously, this year is very different, so we've already been going for a little while, but we've got the Stephen Foster coming up, which is always a great night, Brittany.
It is. And they fit it into a window where NBC could hold it now, as obviously things have been changed. It's a little bit earlier than we would normally see it. And the Stephen Foster, a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Classic, and the Fleur de Lis, a win and you're in for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. So the males and the females each taking the stage Saturday at Churchill Downs.
Stephen Foster, the man who composed My Old Kentucky Home, right?
I don't know.
Hang on, you're supposed to know these things. Right, tell me if I'm wrong. I think I'm right. And you can follow...
Google that.
Dear.
It's normally in the research packet. I'm not on the show.
Are you not going to Kentucky this weekend?
No. I go to New York next weekend for the Met Mile.
Okay.
Kenny Rice, Donna Barton Brothers will be live on site. So it'll be a great show.
But quite important news as regards Kentucky and horse racing. Yes, insofar as that it's been announced today that the Kentucky Derby will have fans. I'm not sure we quite know how many fans do we yet, but there will be fans at the Derby.
Yeah, I don't think we know the exact details, what the protocols will be, where people will be allowed, but I think that's a step in a very positive direction, having spectators live on site. I don't think we were expecting that necessarily. So that's a positive.
I fancy it won't be 191,000, and I wonder whether there'll be any kind of an infield, but it would be lovely if there were a few people there. Yeah.
Probably not. But I'm really looking forward to, because what kicks it off, like we said, the top 2 races on the Breeders' Cup, which will be at Keeneland this year, the Fleur de Lis and the Stephen Foster. So, Mark, I think we're going to touch base with you in about 15 minutes for the first drink, which will be the first drink.
We're going to do the Garland first tonight.
Okay, everybody get ready for that. And we shall not make him wait any longer.
Tell me before, well, we're not going to, there he is. Let Jeff in, ladies and gentlemen.
Howdy.
So, Jeff, you look like you are in a hotel room. Fill us in. Where are you?
Did my background give it away, Brittany? Yeah. I just flew into Lexington. I'm going to head out to Keeneland and check in on some of the recently arrived 2-year-olds before I head to Churchill Downs for races on Friday and Saturday.
And how's it been getting around, Jeff, the last few weeks? How straightforward has it been? Obviously, some new regulations coming in now as well.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of travel, but the little bit of travel that I've done has been remarkably uneventful. In fact, most of the airports, it's just a handful that I've been in, have been rather light on crowds, and protocols in place on the airplanes with everybody wearing a mask and how you board the plane. Everything's been pretty easy, uneventful, and no issues to date. So that's a plus.
Good. That's how you want it to be. Well, we have plenty of time to be talking about your superstar mare in Midnight Bisou, but start with you. Give us I know, but for those watching, how you got into the sport. When was your first introduction?
So we have like a good 6-7 hours, right? For me to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All day.
Long story, but I'll make it short. So growing up in San Diego, of course, Del Mar is the hometown track. And my oldest brother, Michael, one day for something to do, took me to the races at Del Mar. And I will never forget walking through those gates, and we went straight to the paddock because the first race was going to start. So we hustled to get to the paddock. And I didn't even know what horse racing was at the time. And I saw those beautiful, majestic thoroughbreds walking around that paddock ring and the colorful silks on the jockeys. And I decided in that moment, I told my brother, I said, that's what I'm going to do. And fortunately, at the time, I was much smaller, which didn't continue to stay the way it needed to for me as I got older. But fortunately, my size worked out for the time that I became a jockey. And that's sort of my introduction. That's how I fell in love with horse racing.
Did you go to jockey school? Because we always have so many stories about those that have trained, say, the Lafitte Bimkai. If they're in South America, my dad trained, I believe, in Canada for a bit. Did you go to a jockey school?
So back in the day, and we're talking a long time ago, for me, there really wasn't an available jockey school, or at least if there wasn't one that I was aware of. And of course, back then, you didn't have the internet. You really didn't have access to information. And I literally did not have one familiar friend, contact, or relative anywhere that had anything whatsoever to do with horse racing. So I just was incredibly persistent, and I would call any place remotely related to horse racing in any way, shape, or form. And there was a steward by the name of Alfred Shellhammer, Judge Shellhammer in Southern California, and he took a liking to me because I used to drive him crazy asking for help, how I can get introduced to horse racing. He then introduced me to Muzzy Francis, who used to be a jockey, at the time was the general manager of San Luis Rey Downs, and he invited me to come up and visit with my parents and find out this was a kid that was interested in really learning how to do this. And that's how it happened. So Muzzy took me under his wing, and I lived in the tack room for the first summer, and eventually moved in with Muzzy and his family and trained for about 3 years there at San Luis Rey Downs.
We have a photo of your first victory. Do you remember that moment?
I'll never forget that. And it was one of those situations where I did everything I could do to beat the horse that I was on that eventually won the race. So she won in spite of me. And it was a really sloppy, muddy day at one of the many racetracks that I rode at that's no longer around, Bay Meadows. But I definitely remember that day well. Sweet week. Actually, Jeff. Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff, I was going to say, in case anybody was wondering what the previous picture was that was there for a little while, we need to explain that because this was your alternative career briefly, wasn't it?
That was my ride to the track to get to ride the horse. It's funny because I hadn't seen that picture in a lot of years. It was a national commercial for Disneyland, and I was playing a groom who just got married. I'm the one, it's hard to see, I'm the guy driving the car. And it was back in the day when that question would go around after some success, what are you going to do now? Well, we're going to Disneyland. So me and my bride in that car were on our way to Disneyland.
You really wanted to be an actor?
I actually did. It was oddly enough, towards the end of my writing career, I accidentally fell into some modeling and acting opportunities when I was up in Canada. And it wasn't anything I had ever thought of. And then when I stopped riding races, I came back to California and I enrolled at the Beverly Hills Playhouse. And things kind of took off for me for a little while. So I did a number of plays. I got to do a number of commercials, and I'm really close to, I guess, making it in the industry. I had the same agent as Christina Applegate at the time, who of course has done a lot more on the big screen than I have. I'm sure you were aware. I decided I was in a final callback for, I want to say it was Growing Pains at the time, one of those sitcoms. And it was between me and another guy, and I didn't get the role. And it was going to be a recurring role. And when I didn't get it, I said, that's not for me. I don't want to be a waiter for the next 20 years trying to catch my next role. So
if there are any casting agents watching this show, which I'm sure there are, they tune in pretty much every week. Just cast your eyes, please, not on me, but on my two fellow hosts here right now, and please realize how Hollywood's loss has been horse racing's gain.
It took a lot of years for that to be said, Nick, but now I am free with myself after finally hearing that. Thank you.
I mean, this would be an entire episode, though, if we wanted to talk about Nick's venture with the stage. There are some wonderful photos of that as well. We might need to bring that back one day, but I will.
I'm sure. I'd be fairly sure that now you mentioned that particular photo that I know that you're referring to, that somebody is digging it up. I would think.
I do hope so. But yes, you were right. Acting's loss is horse racing's gain in terms of what you've done for horse racing, Jeff. I think that Bloom Racing and Midnight Bisou in particular has just given a life to new fans. Can you take me back, though, to when you found her? Did you purchase her at a sale? How did she come to be a part of the Bloom Racing family?
Yeah, so Midnight Bisou, I acquired her as a 2-year-old at the OBS spring sale, and she was one of a handful of horses that I had purchased at that particular sale. She was one of 2 horses that I would call a have to have. When you make a decision at auctions, it's not like you look at a horse and say, well, I kind of want this horse, but Midnight Bisou was a filly that I really just fell for a number of different reasons. And of course, it's easy to say that now and see how things had turned out, but she was one of 2 horses that I really felt like this is a horse I have to have. And at the time, the markets were really strong. And I wasn't really sure that I was going to be able to have her fall within the budget that we had. I assign a value to to every horse that I end up buying. Mm-hmm. And I thought she might have she was going to creep out of that budget. And fortunately, the way things worked out, she didn't. And when the hammer dropped, I was over the top thrilled.
And Jeff, you're someone who has been a great advocate and pioneer of co-ownerships, of bringing people into the sport. When you're doing it at a fairly high level, what challenges does that present?
Well, look, syndication in particular has been a great thing for the sport, and there's been some great organizations that have done some wonderful things in introducing numerous fans to the sport. And I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to level setting people's expectations, communication, and an understanding of what your objectives are. And every situation's unique, whether it's a company or a horse or a specific situation. For Midnight Bisou, as it turns out, she was a horse that was syndicated. In fact, there's very few of our horses are actually publicly syndicated, though we do have partners. In fact, you've probably seen some names like Andrew Yaffe and Lori and Chuck Allen synonymous with Bloom Racing, in that virtually everything that Bloom Racing does, it's in partnership there. But it's a good question, Nick, because I think anything we can do as individuals involved in horse racing to introduce and encourage people to appreciate and understand this great sport of horse racing, the better. And these partnerships have been a great way to make that happen in a much quicker way as it relates to racing and ownership.
Because the truth of sorry, Brett, I was just going to say the truth of the Midnight Bisou story is that you've actually got about 500,000 partners in her.
Fortunately, that's not the case. But
I mean,
she's got a lot of fans, and that's
yeah.
It's look, I've been in this game pretty much my whole life, and for me, I get it, I appreciate it, I understand it, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. But what's really gratifying, and I've been fortunate enough to travel all over the world for various reasons in the industry, but doing it with Midnight Bisou and being able to get those goosebumps when people are yelling over the fence or the grandstand or asking if they could ask you a question or get as close as possible to her just to get a picture of her. And it's just the feeling that you get, the elation, the appreciation for it is just really hard to put into words what that means to me, having been in this game for so long, and to be able to be so closely associated with Midnight Bisou and able to enjoy that and experience that. It's just a remarkable experience.
Barton 3215 asks, 500,001, let me in, please. I'm sure anybody would love to be a part of such a special mare like her. She always showed incredible talent. At what point did you notice that fan base started to surround her?
I think with her making the early part of her career in Southern California, as you might recall, in Southern California, she basically took her division by storm, winning 3 important graded stake races in a row, capping that off with the Santa Anita Oaks. And I think her performance in particular, when she won the Santa Anita Oaks, it was an off that day, and she had so much work left to do. She had to come from way out of it. And she made a move in that race. I would almost call it not a middle move. It was like a back of the race move when Mike started picking up the reins, and she just like re-broke from the backstretch home and never let up. I think after that, people really saw in Midnight Bisou that this is a filly who's not only quite versatile because she's shown speed, she's shown that she could sprint, she could go 2 turns. I think the Santa Anita Oaks is when really people started getting in her corner and getting behind her.
How big a decision was it to take her to Saudi Arabia? Because it wasn't a decision that everybody in the US was in love with.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll never forget. We were at Saratoga when the folks from Saudi came to do the big introduction during the Saratoga meet, and just when they announced this $20 million, it was kind of like, well, that's a lot of money. It's a horse race. We have a horse that's pretty good, and at the time it wasn't like, well, that's our plan. We'll go to Saudi Arabia with Midnight Bisou. But as she continued to develop and to excel and to improve and to show that she's worthy of competing on the biggest stage, I can tell you that prior to running in the Breeders' Cup, when we had announced that we were not going to sell her, that we were going to continue racing, it didn't hurt knowing that there was a $20 million race on the horizon to make that decision a little bit easier.
You got to take us through that race. I mean, her finish was remarkable. She's facing some of the best. Just for you, what was that entire experience and that stretch run like?
Emotional. So one thing for sure is I was over there and got to see Midnight Bisou training and how she looked leading up to the race. And having been around her since the day I purchased her, I saw in her that she's ready. Now, is she good enough to compete against the best male racehorses in the world? And so felt very confident going into the starting gate. And it's like time stands still during the course of a race, watching it live. And I really do like to watch a race live because I like to really see what the rider's doing, what the other riders are doing, and not so much on TV. And so the race didn't set up exactly the way I thought it would. I thought she'd be a little closer to the pace, but we know that Midnight has all kinds of ability and can overcome so much adversity. When I took a close look at Mike as best I could see that he had a lot of horse, and I thought, she's starting to pick up the bit a little bit. When they came around the turn, I thought, I think we could actually win this thing. When they got about midway through the stretch, I thought, we actually are going to win this thing. I just didn't know if there was enough real estate to get there. And then there was a fleeting moment where I thought, God, we're not even going to hit the board. And then, you know, I would say the last like 10 jumps from the wire was like, oh my gosh, I mean, we might actually win this. We might actually win this. And I'll never forget, you know, it felt like we lost by a nose. You know, you can't, you know, when it's happening live. And I tend to move around a lot. You don't want to be near me trying to watch a race because I need to stretch.
You run with your horses.
Somebody has to help them, Brittany, you know, and not me. But Steve Asmussen and I and Scott Blasey, assistant trainer, we were all near each other when the race started. We probably couldn't have been as far apart when it finished, but the first person I saw after the race was Steve. We both turned around at the same time and just looked at each other in just awe of our filly. It was both, oh, we could have won, but oh my gosh, look what she just did. And I'll never forget that moment, like looking at Steve and just the emotion and appreciation there for the filly and just what we have here in her.
Well, Jeff, the stretch run hasn't finished.
That's true.
I mean, where are we going to go? Where are we at with this?
It's a good question. You know as much as I do. You mean in terms of like what's the result and who is officially?
Yeah.
So as it was announced to the public, there was an internal investigation that was started by the Jockey Club of Saudi Arabia. That investigation is still ongoing, and there hasn't been a whole lot of communication. I know that they've been somewhat restricted in their ability to accelerate that investigation due to COVID-19. It's a process. I do know this much, that they want resolution. They want this thing completely resolved as soon as possible. The Saudis want to continue to have this incredible event that provides a stage and opportunity for horses to race from all over the world for a lot of money. But as it stands today, Nick, we don't have a firm answer as to is anything going to change, or you know, what are the end results? And hopefully within the next week or two, we'll all know the answer to that.
However it plays out, she ran huge. Go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, because, you know, I was there, so I don't really need to tell anybody. But what was your experience like overall? If you're taking out what happened subsequently, in terms of the overall experience for you as an owner and being there, was it different to how you expected, or how did you find it?
Yeah, it was different, and also at the same time not as different as I expected. I think that for the first time in their hosting an event of this magnitude and with these many different international interests, I think the key takeaway was they did a phenomenal job on the horse side in terms of facilitating things for the horses and the connections and having things properly in place so that horses coming in from all different sorts of venues, geographies, and situations were able to properly train and to run over a race course, which in my opinion was arguably one of the best, most finest racetrack surfaces I've ever seen in my life. The turf course and the dirt course, exceptional condition. And you know, the other stuff that they I think have a lot to build off of. Prince Bandor and his team are incredibly interested and enthusiastic in making things bigger and better as it continues to evolve. And I would hope that I have an opportunity to go back to Saudi Arabia and compete with not only maybe Midnight Bisou again, but with other horses in the future. And look, they put up a lot of money, and there's huge opportunities there for people in racing to go after that money. And I think the whole world was very intrigued by Saudi Arabia being part of the global picture for racing, and they did a great job in having a first event like that. Unfortunately, who would have known that we would have this issue with federal indictments with some of the participants, and you know, uncertainty about whether or not the results will stand. But you know, what are you going to do? They're trying to make the best of it that they can.
Right. Well, like I said, an incredible run by her there. And I know that your family gets just as involved as you do. So with that, it only seems fitting that we bring in your daughter, Hannah Bloom, who has found a love for horse racing as well. You have two daughters, Hannah and Ashley, and love seeing them out at the racetrack. Hannah, thank you for joining us, part of the Grand Slam social team. Jeff, you've got to be so proud of her. Did you ever expect Hannah would end up working in horse racing?
Only because I drilled it into her head and said it was mandatory, that if she didn't, there would be a lot of issues. I actually know that I didn't think either of my daughters would end up being involved in horse racing in any way, shape, or form. And as it turns out, Hannah has fallen in love with our sport. I'm happy she has, and I couldn't be more proud of both my girls.
Oh.
And it's good to see you, Hannah.
Hi. I know. He had no idea. He really didn't.
I love it. Two separate spaces, I'm sure here. So Hannah, where are you at the moment?
So I'm currently in San Diego.
San Diego. I know how much you love Midnight Bisou. There was a really special photo. I don't know if we have the photo, but we have the race. Was it from the personal ensign at Saratoga?
I think I can think of the photo you're thinking of where I'm kissing her. That's from the Ogden Pips, but the personal ensign there was nothing like that race, that's for sure.
Take us through that though. I mean, what a hearty performance. She was all guts that day against a late.
Oh yeah, that last few seconds, it was like, are we gonna get there? Are we gonna get there? It was nuts. I mean, there's some videos of me. It's not my favorite, because then when they finally, they then had to go to see who won, and my reaction when they actually said we won was not my favorite, but I was just very excited. So yeah, she's just, oh man, that was amazing. It was like so close to call. No one could really tell. Some people were telling me no, some were like, you've got it. And then I kept looking. In those instances, I always looked to my dad, kind of like watch his face, see what he's thinking. And in that one, he really didn't know. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to think. So.
And that was a really special day at Saratoga. You're in San Diego now. We've been having this Del Mar Saratoga thing all the way through this series. Did that day seal it for you, Hannah?
Oh man, you're trying to get me to choose one side or the other. It's so political, Nick. But I mean, I grew up. It's hard because I think my roots lie in Del Mar, just because that's where born and raised. That was my first track, etc. So that'll always hold a special place in my heart. But there's no place like Saratoga, I will say.
Del Mar. What about you?
Brittany's like shaming me right now. It's fine.
What are you saying, Jeff?
That was a diplomatic answer, sort of, by Hannah. It's like, look, for me, like Hannah, I grew up in San Diego. I rode my very first race at Del Mar in front of a hometown crowd, but Saratoga, especially after conquering the personal ensign with Midnight Bisou, I'm leaning that way, I think.
Oh,
I'm like California. I gotta take it back. Just kidding. It's Del Mar all the way.
You know what? We just need Midnight Bisou to run at Del Mar and the Distaff when it comes back there. And then perhaps, your thoughts will be changed. Hannah, give us some sort of insight to your dad and what he's like on race day.
Oh, man. Okay. So he's pretty calm, cool, and collected, I would say. I mean, he doesn't really drink at the race as much, but he'll always have a Bloody Mary on race day. That's kind of his go-to thing. To relax the nerves. And then, he kind of just keeps to himself. And then in the paddock, he's calm, cool, and collected too. And then during the race, he definitely he watches alone. We don't watch with him. And he does, he always has to have something in his hand to hit kind of when they're coming down the stretch. And yeah, he'll usually follow the horses or not, but it's usually hard to find him, especially after we win or something, or if we don't, he's gone. It's like, where'd he go? I don't know where he ran to. So he's pretty funny to watch during the race.
I'm waiting for Nick. Nick all of a sudden has gotten very quiet.
Oh, I was just enjoying this so much. I have to just interject in case you think I'm being a bit sleepy this week. I worked a 9-race card at Leicester this evening, which is about 2 hours away, and the last race was 8:55, and this show started at 11 o'clock. So you can do the. You can do the maths and work out the turnaround time was quite small, and you can probably still smell the tires on the M1.
You're a champ. You are
No, I'm not trying to be a martyr. It's just there's not some kind of weird delay. It's just my brain's taking a little longer to process information. This is what we wanted to see. Hannah, just tell us what the coolest dad in the world is up to here.
Oh man, so as Brittany's been to these parties, but usually almost every summer we'll do a Bloom Racing kind of kickoff to the Del Mar meet at the Belly Up. It's a concert venue in Solana Beach, and this was I think our first year. I actually don't remember, but he got up on stage and performed a song, opened for the band. It was pretty entertaining to watch. I think that's the best way to put it.
Jeff, how long have you been playing the guitar? Or was that just you picked it up right in that moment?
It's actually the bass, which is much easier than the guitar. And I can play one song every year on the bass, and that's it. So to say that I can play the guitar, not so much. I can fake my way through a song.
And tell us who is in the forefront of that, because you mentioned his name earlier and a big part of Bloom Racing family.
That would be Andrew Yaffe, huge music guy. And so he was responsible for getting those Bloom Racing parties going, which, by the way, that I think was the second year when we had Styx. The first year was Cheap Trick, right before they got inducted into the Hall of Fame. So we got to get up on stage and play on the same stage with one of my all-time favorite bands, Cheap Trick. I'll never forget that.
See, this is why Del Mar should take the cake. I mean, come on, there's no Bloom Racing parties in Saratoga.
She's not
yet. Not yet.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Hannah Bloom, when are we going to see you next?
I don't know. I guess if we can all start traveling to these big races again, maybe the Derby is when I would see you again. Who knows?
Fingers crossed.
I'm missing out the races.
Can you get Trump to let me in first? Please.
But until then, people should know that you are doing so much incredible hard work behind the scenes on social media for Grand Slam Social. So well done. The industry is lucky to have you, my dear.
Thank you very much.
It's drink
Hi, honey.
We need to follow up that Bloom Racing party and that guitar shot with our first cocktail of the evening. So Mark Tuberty, come back in here.
Yes, guys. That was awesome. You know, I actually play guitar as well, and my brother plays bass, Jeff, and I can definitely relate to the one song a year thing. He masters one and then moves on, but I love it. So, guys, with the exception of the Mint Julep, which has really been the official cocktail of the Kentucky Derby for as long as any of us can remember, most race day cocktails, these official cocktails, have to go through some period of evolution. So the Black Eyed Susan, which is the official cocktail of Preakness, has always really had the same name, but the recipe has varied widely over the years. And the Belmont Stakes, they've had numerous cocktails throughout the years. Started off as the White Carnation, and then it became the Belmont Breeze around 1998, and then finally the Belmont Jewel in 2012. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that even with our very own Breeders' Cup cocktails, we had to go through some sort of period of trial and error. And I know that because I was there for every trial and every error. So our Garland cocktail, which we're starting off with tonight, just like the White Carnation and the Black Eyed Susan, pays tribute to the beautiful blanket of flowers that we drape over the winning horses each year at the Breeders' Cup. And it wasn't always the simple combination of vodka, triple sec, lemon juice, and green honey tea that we have today. In fact, when the drink debuted in the director's room at Churchill Downs back in 2018, the entire drink was actually purple. And the way it got that way was we actually had an ingredient called butterfly PT, PEA, don't worry. It's a beautiful blue flower, it yields a blue tea, and that tea actually turns purple when it reacts with citrus. So it's a very cool thing. Of course, the Breeders' Cup cocktails, you know, the colors bringing in the purple into it, but it was difficult for the racetracks to source that ingredient. So we opted out of that. One of the other ingredients.
Your mouth purple, not attractive.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. See, that's something that I wouldn't think of. So I need to keep you close, Brittany. And then we also had a homemade honey syrup, which lent a luxurious texture to the drink. But there was one problem with that. When you have a homemade ingredient, that's a variable, right? So someone could make the syrup too sweet or not sweet enough. And when you're dealing with thousands of drinks on race day, you don't want to take that chance. So we took it back to the drawing board, and I came up with a simple combination that we have today of Tito's handmade vodka, triple sec, fresh lemon juice, and green honey tea. So let's get started. I know every single week I'm shocked and amazed to see so many people, like your parents, Brittany, that are gathering these ingredients, making sure they're ready to go for Thursday nights, and that warms my heart. So
the Bloom family is big on following the show and making the cocktails, especially
awesome.
Jeff and Susie.
I appreciate it. I was wondering, Jeff, I know you're in a hotel room right now. Can you raid the minibar? Can you have a cocktail with us? I don't know. There you go. I had a feeling. All right, so for everyone following at home, we're going to start our cocktail with 3/4 of an ounce of fresh lemon juice. You guys have heard me say it every single week. When you're using citrus juices, make sure they're as fresh as possible, preferably day of, okay? Now we're going to do 1.5 ounces of honey green tea. So this was one of those kind of compromises when we were thinking about how do we still get the flavor of freshly brewed tea and the honey sweetness without actually having the butterfly pea tea and the honey syrup that you have to make in-house. So I found that both Honest Tea and Pure Leaf have this great product, honey green tea, that you can purchase at gas stations, grocery stores. Most importantly, it's consistent. So that's really what we want in a race day drink, okay?
Sounds healthy.
So, what's
Green
that?
tea. Sounds healthy.
It is. Yeah, so you know what? You can always justify that you're hydrating, antioxidants, right? That's why we're having it. All right, now we're going to add 1.5 ounces of triple sec. One easy way to elevate this cocktail is use a high-end brand of triple sec. So I'm going to use some Cointreau, 1.5 ounces, so the same amount that we did for the honey green tea. Okay. And finally, 1.5 ounces of Tito's handmade vodka. So you can tell already this is going to be a very refreshing drink. You can have at least 2 or 3 of these. It's a sessionable drink. If it's hot at the track, it's going to quench your thirst and relax you if you have some of those tense moments like Jeff was talking about when you're waiting to see if your horse is going to get in by a nose. All right. So again, equal proportions of 3 of those ingredients, the vodka, the triple sec, and the honey green tea. And we're doing a half part of the lemon juice. Really as simple as it gets. We're going to add some ice to our cocktail shaker.
Nick, did that champagne glass just pop out of nowhere?
It's amazing, isn't it? It's magic. It just
floated in.
By the power of telepathy, my wife suddenly realized that I needed a drink.
I was going to say, judging by how you raced in to this show, I would need a drink as well. All right, I'm going to give this a good shake, guys.
I'll sort me out.
I like this.
I don't think I've ever done that shake.
I love this by John Hirko. He made them for the 2019 Breeders' Cup. I'm glad you thought they were delicious. I'm sorry they didn't help the betting. It'll come around. Eventually it will, I think. All right, so we are going to strain that cocktail over fresh ice. If you have time or you have enough ice to do this, this is great because remember, the ice that we've shaken with has already served its purpose. It's already been partially broken down in the shaker. We want to strain this over nice full structured ice. All right. And for garnish, it's easy enough to do a lemon wheel if you like, but another compromise because we lost the purple color from the butterfly PT was trying to get it in a little flower garnish here. So that is our Garland cocktail. Perfect. At the tracks or in your very own home. Cheers, guys.
That looks refreshing.
Cheers, Mark. Back with you a little bit later on. The Breeders' Cup Garland. Mark Tubridy, our resident mixologist here on Cocktails and Conversations, as we welcome in our next guest this evening. He is the one, the only friend of the show, Tom Amoss Racing. I say friend of the show, Tom. You've probably never seen it before.
Yeah, but I've seen you. Last time we were together was probably Breeders' Cup. It was a great time. That goes to you as well, Brittany. It's good to see you guys again. Jeff, I'll be seeing you tomorrow.
Exactly.
Well, we got to explain the matchup here, of course, and why this is fitting to have both of you together, or maybe not friendly competition. Jeff Bloom, of course, having Midnight Bisou, and Tom Amoss sending out Kentucky Oaks winner Serengeti Empress. Do you two know each other, aside from knowing of each other?
So I'll take it first, Jeff. You can take it after me. But friend or foe? That is the question. And the answer is friend. So, Jeff, I'm honored to be training some of his younger horses, some of his 2-year-olds that just started this year. And tomorrow, Jeff and I will be at Keeneland together to watch his horses go. And we're going to have a great time. I think we have very much, I know at least on my end, a great respect for each other's horses. I think Midnight Bisou. I've been a huge fan of hers. The first time Jeff and I met was at Oaklawn Park when I think she won the Azeri. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. And we did the show for Fox Sports, and he was in the winner's circle, which was right behind our set. So I actually told him congratulations. But that's about the only words I've spoken to him, other than through text. So I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Likewise, it's funny because and you cross paths in this industry and stuff, but yet there's not been a real formal meet and greet yet up until this point. Oddly enough, and likewise as well, the mutual respect is there, and also a fan of your filly. It's going to be a great race, and have some exciting 2-year-olds to look at in the morning as well.
Nick, this is so pleasant.
It's lovely. It's not. I mean, we try and create tension on the show every week, but we simply can't find it anywhere. There's just too much. There's too much love around the place. I mean, the one thing that unites these two great horses, and people always say, if you've got a really good filly, she will give you absolutely everything. And I haven't seen two females racing that will lay down more than Midnight and Serengeti Empress. They're just tremendously tough, Tom.
Yeah, look, Nick, I think, and I'm going to speak to Midnight Bisou because I've been a fan of hers for a long time. If you were to compare her to a human athlete, and I love football a great deal, American football, Nick. So because of that, my brother is the team doctor for the New Orleans Saints, and I'm familiar with all those guys, and I've been going to Saints games since I was a kid. Midnight Bisou is the Barry Sanders of horse racing. And if you're an old school guy like me, then she's the Gale Sayers of horse racing. Just this filly that's poetry in motion, beautiful to watch, just like those guys were as running backs in the NFL, and can change her style to suit any race situation, which is probably trouble for me on Saturday. But how can you not like or respect a mare that's just that good? And you know what? I was disappointed to see her come back this year, but as a racing fan, I thought that was great.
But your filly Serengeti Empress, she's made some pretty spectacular comebacks of her own, and I thought her victory last year, her signature victory, was one of the great comebacks of the season, one of the great stories of the season, really. But because there was so much else going on, I'm not really sure we stopped and paused and really gave it the credit it deserved.
Well, you know what? From a personal standpoint, you're right. There was a lot of things going on going into her Kentucky Oaks. She had been eased in the Fairgrounds Oaks. There was a lot of questions about her soundness, which she's perfectly sound, and whether she could come back or not. Look, social media can hurt you in a lot of ways, but it can help you in a lot of ways. And as far as Serengeti Empress goes, I tried to be as transparent as I could on social media as to her progression as she led to the Kentucky Oaks. So if you were paying attention, you got what I think are some really good handicapping tips on a 13-1 in the Kentucky Oaks. So,
for sure,
in that case, that was a good thing, and it all worked out. So all the pushback going into the Kentucky Oaks, it's like any moment that works out and it's a beautiful moment. You forget all that, and I don't hold any animosity towards anyone or to PETA that certainly called me out before the race and gave me a lot of sleepless nights before the Kentucky Oaks. But in the end, it just, it's hard to win a race like that and not be right with the world. I was right with the world that day.
And what struck me, Tom, and we spoke before the race, and you put me straight and said, I really like a chance, and I passed this on to our viewers, and gave it the full unvarnished edition. And I remember thinking to myself afterwards, you've got to be pretty ballsy to do that and to have that much faith in your horse. And I just thought it was lovely that you had so much faith in her to deliver for you when you had that much pressure on.
Well, it's funny you say that. So there was a lot on the line, for sure. If she has a bad experience on national TV, if she doesn't finish the race, if something happens that, I did all I could to anticipate wouldn't happen, I'm sure that maybe my career trajectory would be a little different than what it is today. But it worked out. And as I said, there were a lot of sleepless nights those last 4 nights before the Kentucky Oaks. But, all is right with the world. I'm totally cool with it.
I think we're lucky that we have this matchup. It would have been even more incredible of a race if Monomoy Girl had been in it as well. But Jeff, it was so sporting of you to keep Midnight Bisou in training, and that's allowed us to have this matchup of two sensational horses. What do you think, one, keeping her in training, but having these moments where you've got top class athletes not ducking each other, facing off in a race like the Fleur de Lis?
Well, look, it was, I mean, just the business decision part of it was tough, not to sell, but the emotional decision was an easy one. And so once we made the decision to race, we were relieved, and we also recognized that they're not going to just give you wins after you do make this decision. So I think just as a race fan, that these kinds of matchups are phenomenal for racing. And it's hard when you're in the heat of the moment to reflect, to appreciate what that means. But when you take a step back and you look at what these kinds of matchups do for racing and why we're all in this great sport, that's what it's all about. Mm-hmm. And as much as I would have liked Tom to skip this race with his filly to make it that much easier on us, it's good for racing, and we're going to have our running shoes on, as is every other horse in there. That's what racing's all about. They don't just hand you those victories. Mm-hmm. So we've never regretted the decision we made to continue racing, and we're looking forward to continuing that campaign.
I love it. It's great for everybody watching, everybody that's a fan, because these are two horses that you know very, very well, Serengeti Empress and Midnight Bisou in the Fleur de Lis on NBC. Now, this young horse might look somewhat familiar, half-sister to champion Midnight Bisou. Tom, I hear she's coming through.
She's got the look. I mean, I'm looking at a horse that has a great shoulder, proportioned well, and a very good engine, we like to call it. That's the rear end. So who am I looking at? Tell me.
Half-sister to Midnight Bisou. And apparently her name is going to be revealed on the show on Saturday. So fans got to get involved. But do we see any similarities, Jeff, coloring or any of that to Midnight Bisou? Looks like a nice race.
Her ears are up, so that's something right there. And it looks like she's got that intelligent eye. She's a little bit lighter in color than Midnight, although it's funny, depending upon what picture you're looking at of Midnight, sometimes she'll look like a bay, and sometimes she looks as black as night. But certainly a lot of body there on this half to Midnight for sure. And the family, they can run. She's got a half brother that he's chalking up a lot of wins as well.
Oh, I love it. It's great that we have these horses stay in training like the two that each of you have, because you get to be familiar with them, and then the fans can latch on to their brothers and sisters or their progeny. So I cannot wait for this matchup. Best of luck to you both. Tom, you're sticking around with us, but Jeff, thank you for the time and good luck on Saturday.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. See you, Tom.
Good luck, Jeff.
Jeff, thanks so much. The great Jeff Bloom, and how brilliantly, Tom, they've handled their filly as well. Like just the public access, the fact they've kept it going, lots of racing, taken around the world.
Yeah, it's just us three. I can say what I want now, right?
Yeah, you can flag it now. He's gone. Yeah.
All right. No, seriously. I mean, I'm a huge fan of that filly. I've watched Mike Smith ride her. I've watched how he has changed her style depending on the race setup, which actually is something that worries me, because I think when you look at this race, I think it's real possible for riders to get caught up with just one another. And and that certainly has a chance to happen on Saturday, because it looks like it's us and her. And so let's just say that, I mean, everybody knows what we're going to do with with Serengeti Empress. I'm 2 vodkas in. Sorry, guys. I mean, it started at 6 o'clock and it took me 40 minutes to get on the air. So I had a few.
That's what this show is supposed to be.
Yeah, right. But so everybody knows what we're going to do. We're going to go to the lead, Nick. I mean, that's no secret. And so for anyone to beat us, you got to position yourself correctly. And so Mike Smith has a way of taking really good horses and changing their style on occasion. It always seems to work out for him. So I certainly think that she's one of those kind of horses. So I'm curious when we turn on the backside, not only where I'll be, which I think when I say me, I'm talking about Midnight, I'm talking about Serengeti Empress. I'll be on the front, but what will I have to have done to get to the front, and where will Midnight Bisou be against what I've had to use energy-wise with my horse to get to that position? So I think it's got a lot to do with the race.
Tom, she seems to be able to roll at a pretty quick clip, though. I remember talking to you at Oaklawn Park on Rebel Day when she was running, and you wanted her to set pretty quick fractions early because as long as she's out there with some spacing, she can keep going. And that's an asset most horses don't have, to be able to roll along that quickly when they're not pressed. Is it just a matter of when horses get in a rhythm, even if they're going quick, that they're still comfortable? Is that it for her?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and a great observation. And the answer to that is that she's got a terrific cruising speed. It's fast, and she can carry it a long way as long as she's not being challenged by another horse. So you're giving an example there, Brittany, of her at her best in that race that day. So when you come back to a race after that, the Apple Blossom, you draw post 11. You've got a horse like Cookie Dough directly to your inside in post 10, and you're both committed to trying to make the front end. And in the case of Cookie Dough, she's a horse that doesn't negotiate the turns well. And I distinctly remember going into that race and telling the owner, Joel Politi, who really understands racing. He grew up with horses. He knows horse racing. As a matter of fact, when we picked her out at the sale, when I found her, he was with me. He took a couple of days off from work. And he liked her as much as I did. But getting back to the question, so on that particular day, I really had a bad feeling about how it was going to go. There's so much speed in the race. The coronavirus was at its height. There were very few racetracks operational. So a lot of the fillies and mares that probably wouldn't have picked the Apple Blossom as a race had nowhere else to go, and they decided to go. So it was a real hosh-posh of horses, and it created an environment pace-wise that wasn't really suitable for us. And with the outside post to boot, when we came out of the first turn, we weren't on the lead. We were about a half length off the lead. And I had said on the air that we did the Fox Sports show that day, America's Day at the Races. And I said, listen, if we're not on the lead when we come out of the first turn, we're not going to run well. So, for the handicapper, it's a horse like mine is certainly a one-dimensional speed horse, but that's a term that can be used almost at any level of horse. Horses that run their best races when they're on the lead. Look, you want to call her a one-dimensional speed horse? I won't disagree with you. I think you're right. But she's not only the best one-dimensional speed horse I've ever had, she's the best talent I've ever had. So, that I don't consider that a knock when you call her that.
She's remarkable. Not many horses can go at that clip and keep on going. I want to bring this up because I have been asked this question a lot. That day, Rebel Day, Sean Payton, coach of the New Orleans Saints, was there and just absolutely wonderful. Did an interview with me. You were hanging out with him most of the time. And then a week later, he tested positive for COVID-19. What was the aftermath of that like for you personally, having been around him so much? So I know for me, it was a lot of anxiety of wondering if I was going to be okay. And I reached out to you. How was those following days?
So in Louisiana at that time, the COVID situation wasn't well understood. And we were getting ready to be a hotspot as far as the nation was concerned. But at that time, not so much. And so I was naive to what all of that meant, and naive to just how serious the COVID situation was. And I think that a lot of people were, I'm going back, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were in March at the time that happened, like early March. Mm-hmm. And,
right.
A lot of things hadn't occurred yet. I don't think the NBA had shut down yet. I don't think that the economy had shut down. I know they hadn't, as a matter of fact. But look, Coach Payton and I have been friends for a while now. We've known each other through the years. My brother works for him as a team doctor. My daughter works for him as a videographer. And so we have a good relationship. It was great seeing him. He's a big Serengeti Empress fan. He bet on her in the race. And so we had a great time that afternoon, along with my wife, Colleen. And when it came down that he had tested positive, which I actually heard on the radio between races at fairgrounds. I'd won a race at the fairgrounds. I'd gone to the coffee shop to get a coffee to then compete in the next race at the fairgrounds, which is the coffee shop's like 5 blocks away. On Sirius radio in my car, I heard that he had tested positive, and I was like, wow, what does that mean for me? And I did it more, quite honestly, out of the pressure of, outside people saying, hey, if you've been in contact with someone with COVID, you have to, step away. You have to quarantine. And so it wasn't like I felt a need to do it for myself as much as I felt a need to do it pressure-wise by society. And, look, that's a lot different today. I understand the disease today. My father passed away from it in March. So, I didn't know all those things then. So I was naive to it, most certainly. But at least I was smart enough to understand that it was above my pay grade to understand at that time. But we didn't have a lot of information out there in the United States when that first occurred.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we've had a similar situation here in a sense. I think we've been, compared to some other European countries, we were behind the curve. We locked down a bit late. If we'd locked down 2 or 3 weeks earlier, I think we'd be in a slightly different position now. And I think that the UK and the US have had significant problems because of that slightly delayed reaction. So obviously in the United States, there's so many, it's so much bigger and so many different areas which are affected that it only exacerbates the sense that we've had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that and Tom, you can speak on this, the racetracks have put forth these protocols in place, and I think allowed racing to continue in a safe manner, and that's been a wonderful thing to see, because we know how important live racing is to those that work on the backside. But also, you've given us, and you mentioned this before on social media, a real insight into your barn, your team, and I think not everybody is necessarily pivoted like that. So I think you were almost ahead of the game being on social media, because people want that. If you can't be on site, you want to have some sort of feel for what's going on at the track since you can't be there. Have you upped your social media game even more during these times?
Oh.
We may have lost him.
He's gone.
Oh, wait. Tom,
now he's about to. So now he's about to go up the social media game.
No, just saying how during these times we've seen a lot of people pivot, and the racetrack obviously having to put forth a ton of protocols, and those that would normally come out to the track can't really get that insight. You have already had a presence on social media. How have these times changed anything for you? Do you feel like you do it more often? Do you feel like you want to give people a closer look since they can't come back to the track?
So it's frustrating. Horse racing is about fans. I mean, I love going up and competing against other trainers, and my horses competing against other horses, and we keep score. Who wins this, who wins that. And I love the fans are a big part of that when you go up to the track. And, one of the best moments of my life was winning the Kentucky Oaks. And when you get into that rare winner circle that they only use for the Oaks and the Derby, which is the infield, they don't use it at Churchill except for those 2 races. I had a moment of turning to the crowd as she came to me and seeing everybody outside, which is how it goes at Churchill Downs. Everybody watches the race outside. And it's just, 100,000 plus people, and everybody's cheering. Obviously, not everybody bet on her. She was 13-1, but they respect the champion. And so they're all cheering. And to race now and to not have that, she won the Azeri at Oaklawn with no fans. But just on a daily basis, it's not the same. And I miss it greatly. I miss the fans. I can't tell you how many fans I know by face. I don't know their names, particularly at the fairgrounds. Quite a few fans. I don't know their names, but we always converse on a daily basis. They're my friends. I don't want to say if they're nameless, because they're not. I know them by their face, and I miss those people that come up to you and say, "Hey, Tom, how's your horse doing? I miss that a lot. So I was really excited when Churchill Downs announced that the Derby is going to have fans in September. I think that's really important, and I look forward to that. And if we're not going to have fans at Saratoga, and at least for now it doesn't look like we are, then that's going to be our first opportunity to have fans back at the races, and I can't wait.
Tom, you as obviously you're a racing fan, but you're a racing professional. For you as a fan of other sports, as an LSU devotee, as a massive Saints fan, maybe the biggest Saints fan, how much are you missing your opportunity to indulge in your pastimes? Sure.
So look, I mean, Nick, I don't want to say something that's going to be taken in the wrong way. But we all have a way of life, and we all have, how we get through our day and what we do to get through our day that we're accustomed to. So I'm 58 years old, getting maybe 59. So my way of life is ingrained. And those things are special to me, and they're important to me. So as we move forward, and we've lost so many things in our daily life that we're accustomed to, it becomes not only stressful from the standpoint of, your job, which we all know about that, but stressful from the standpoint of not doing the things you ordinarily do. So, handling that stress and getting back to a place where you're comfortable, I think that's really important. So these things you're talking about, Nick, whether it be the Saints games or the LSU football games or anything else that might seem a little less important to someone else that's not into it. I ask you to look at the things that you're into and the things that aren't there now that would be otherwise. And I ask you to say to yourself, doesn't that make a difference in your life? And if it does, don't you want it back? And I know, for one, I speak for my wife, of course, because we do a lot of things together. We want it back. We're ready to take part in it, and hopefully the world gets back to where it was, back in January this year.
I think we're realizing how much we probably have taken for granted. This ability to go outside and, walk to a park where a bunch of people are, or go to a sporting event and, root on your favorite team. There's so many things that we've taken for granted, but I think it's also allowed us to realize what means the most in our life. And a lot of people are finding that they get to spend more time with their family, which is wonderful. And speaking of family, it's a daddy-daughter day, so it wouldn't be a full show.
Oh, look out!
Hey
guys, what's up,
girl?
Haley, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I love it. Where are you right now?
In the room next door.
Oh, this is tremendous.
Yes, surprise.
This is tremendous.
Oh, this is so great. But your dad was just talking about how much we miss those certain sporting events, or just the things that make us really happy. For you, how challenging has been the quarantine and those little things being taken away?
Well, I can speak on behalf of not physically being able to be there for the races. Serengeti Empress, it means a ton to our family. And for me not to be able to go to her races, especially this weekend, it's going to be a big one. It hurts. It hurts a lot. But, it's fun to cheer it on. We this past weekend, we watched No Parole win a G1 at the Belmont, and it was me, my dad, and my mom together, and that was fun too. So while it's a different vibe, it's definitely something special.
Hey, Haley, I was just going to ask, because if you're for the experience that I've had here, I've got young kids or whatever, but a lot of people who say have kids in their 20s or early 30s or whatever, who aren't away or aren't married or whatever, and they've all ended up in lockdown together, and they've ended up developing an even closer bond and really special relationship with their parents, because they've gone away from home and they've lived away for a bit, and then suddenly they've all been plunged back together for a bit. Has that been the case with you guys?
Well, it actually was not the case for me. I was in Kentucky while they were down in New Orleans. So
you were apart.
Yeah, I was completely alone with my dog, but it was an experience. Nonetheless, we're a close family. We kept in touch, did our happy hours and our FaceTimes. We watched the show, so it was a different experience. But now that the world's a little bit more open, we have some time to get away from each other.
Have you always loved the sport, or is it something that you grew to love?
You know, it's interesting. I get that question a lot. Horses have been a lifelong passion of mine. I grew up riding them. I was in a saddle before I could fit my feet in the stirrups. But horse racing, the sport, I really fell in love with the sport when I was in college. And I can point out that my Lutz Derby Trail was something that was really special to me. We had Rosie Napravnik riding him, and it was just a really exciting opportunity to watch Dad take a 2-year-old and watch that 2-year-old grow. And I mean, I truly believe it was the start of Dad finding that passion of raising some 2-year-olds and making it towards those big classic races.
I want to relive Serengeti's Oaks, though. Can we just relive that moment?
I relive it every day.
I would like to relive that. Do we have Tom falling on the ground? Because that may have been the highlight of the entire afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, y'all have it on video? This is a good one.
Gosh, I hope we have that.
My favorite race is the 2019 Kentucky Oaks with my horse, Serengeti Empress, crossing the finish line first and everything that she brought to us with that win. I don't know what it's like to actually be an athlete in a major event, but I think that walkover is about as close a feeling as you can get to it because you just feel electric inside.
They're off in the Kentucky Oaks.
I really wasn't watching her out of the gate because a horse had stumbled and lost its rider. And I immediately turned to that horse to make sure she was okay. And then I turned my attention back to Serengeti Empress, who was making the lead going to the first turn and saving ground for the 13 hole. That was the plan. So everything to this point is going great. My wife had turned to me and said, 46 and change, that is too quick for a half mile. And I turned and I said, not for my horse, it's not. Turning for home, I thought she cut the corner great. She's going to take a challenge right here. And I'm like, uh-oh. But when Serengeti sees this filly out of the corner of her eye, she re-brakes, takes off, and it's right about here where I realize I'm going to win the Kentucky Oaks.
As they come down to the line, Serengeti Empress has taken the Kentucky Oaks.
I remember raising my hands like this, and then one of my friends patted me on the back, and I lost my balance. And I fell into my daughter, and I fell into my wife, and we hit the floor. And everybody piled on like it was like we just won the World Series. I must have thought about a million things at the same time, but the most overwhelming thought in my head was my parents. And I always hoped I could do something in their lifetime that would make them proud, a signature race. And this was it for me. I mean, how do you describe something that just makes everything in the world seem great? I don't know what's in the future for Tom Amoss Racing Stable, what big races might be out there. But for me, this will be the one, and she'll be the one. I'll never, ever forget her.
Oh, that's special.
Well, now I'm going to cry.
That is special. Whatever you do now, I mean, I know there's an obvious answer as to what can top that, but nothing will quite be able to top that in a certain way, will it? Because it's got you right here, I can tell.
Yeah, no, you're so right, Nick. This was my signature moment of my career. And, you know, fate is so strange. So, you know, I come from a family of 6 boys. If you look at the college resumes of the 6 boys, it goes Yale, Rhodes Scholar, Yale again. 4th one went to Duke. Then the 5th kid, he went to the state school, LSU, and the 6th kid went to a school called Williams and became a doctor. So it's pretty easy on a multiple choice to figure out who the horse trainer is of that group of 6. But in relation to my mom and dad, you know, they knew what I wanted to do, and they knew nothing about horse racing. No one in my family had anything to do with it, and they supported my decision. They said, look, we'll support anything you want to do. You just need to get a college education. And from the time I became a trainer, I always wanted to do something special that they could witness. And I went a long, long time trying to accomplish that. And when I won the Kentucky Oaks, I had the opportunity on national TV to salute them and thank them for everything. And as fate would have it, my mom passed away in the fall of the very next year, and my dad passed away in the spring. And it's funny, I've never asked God for anything as it pertains to my business, because I know he's got a lot more things to worry about than horse racing. But I would ask him, is it one of those big races out there for me? And he waited a long time to give it to me, but he did. He gave it to me in the last year of my parents' life. And I feel so blessed and lucky that I got to do that when my mom and dad were still alive.
Haley, how aware were you as a family of what your dad really wanted and really needed as far as this special moment was concerned, or does he keep it quite well locked in?
Well, I can tell you that growing up in a horse racing family, my dad works 7 days a week. He's up at 4 a.m. every morning, the hardest working people I know. So I know how bad I wanted it for him. So I had to imagine he wanted it just as bad, if not more. When Serengeti Empress crossed the finish line, I cried uncontrollably. So he had to say, Haley, rein it back in. But it was one of those feelings that I mean, it was a team effort. My family's put up in a lot. My dad, obviously the most, but my mom's made some sacrifices. My sister and I have too. And it's that moment what made it all worth it.
It's as much pride that, Tom would have in you, Haley. I know that you have in your father, and that moment probably meant the world.
Brittany, I'm sure you can relate to the emotions.
No, definitely, because you see how hard they work each and every day, and you want them to get that moment, that opportunity on the big stage. So for you, when she crossed the wire first, I mean, how proud were you of him in that moment?
I was just sad I wasn't involved in the dog pile that happened. I was actually on the outside holding a mint julep, and I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. But yeah, no, it was a feeling that if you could bottle that and sell it, you would be a billionaire. So it was one of those moments where you were having such a good time and you were so happy that you knew you were going to miss it down the road.
Yeah, something to never forget, Tom. I know
Haley,
that.
Haley, you were at LSU as well, is that right?
I did. I graduated from LSU. My parents raised us as LSU fans. We've been going to football games since before we could say Tigers. So yeah, I am a Tiger.
And I guess having that kind of now, being able to have those close associations with the people so closely connected with LSU and the sport there has been pretty amazing.
Well, it's pretty unique because there are a lot of tie-ins with the horses. And last year we had Devin White, who is a huge LSU fan, well, LSU player, but huge horse fan too. And he had his horse Daisy May at the time that he got to ride through Tiger Stadium. And Dad, I'll let you take it from here, but you got to spend the day with him along with myself.
Yeah, so Devin White is he's an All-American football player that now plays for the Tampa Bay Bucks. And he was the key to LSU's defense when he was there. He was the man on the field. He was the guy that every quarterback paid attention to on offense because he was the disruptor. And, Devin came to the track Louisiana Derby Day a couple of years ago, and I found him to be quite shy at first, but we bonded because of our love of horses. So he came in the morning and spent the morning with me training, and within an hour, we were talking like we knew each other forever. And we spent the day together. And as a matter of fact, that afternoon, I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to let you saddle one of my horses. So naturally, I picked the one I thought had the best chance to win. And Devin not only saddled the horse, but legged up Irad Ortiz on the horse, and the horse won. So, it doesn't get any better than that for a horse lover. And Devin doesn't know much about thoroughbred racing, but he knows horses. So when we were training that morning, he had all the right questions, very smart, intelligent questions. And look, we still stay in touch. One day, Devin's going to be a horse owner. He's going to be a great horse owner because he understands racing. And most importantly, he has the attribute you want all owners to have, which is he loves horses.
Do you find, Tom, and you could speak on this, training for the late Tom Benson, his wife Gail, owners of the New Orleans Saints, that those in other sports have a real appreciation for the hard work that goes into horse racing and just the equine athlete as a whole? Do you think that they see this industry for how challenging it can be because of how difficult they see the training regime in other sports?
Well, in a sense, I think that's an astute observation. I think that that's certainly true, but I don't think it takes someone in athletics necessarily to see that. I think it takes anyone that's probably successful in their business to understand the amount of time you put in, no matter what you do. So, look, I'll give you a strange analogy. One day when this is all done and I retire, I'm gonna have a garden. I can't wait to plant a garden. That's what I want to do. And to have a successful garden, you have to care for it on a daily basis. You have to always pay attention. I read up on it. I understand what to do. And that's just like any business. If you want your business to be successful, you have to nurture it. You have to pay attention to it. You can't neglect it on one day and then expect it to be there for you the next day. And that's how horse racing is. But I think to be a success in any business, and I'm only guessing here because I've never done anything but horse racing, I think to be a success in any business, you have to be a good gardener. You have to be there every day for your plants and pay attention to them, if that makes any sense at all.
Well said. I'm going to take away from this that Tom Amoss has a green thumb.
Yeah, for sure. If I take away anything from this whole series we've done, is that any success people have, or any time people are any good at what they do, it's because, yes, they've got talent, but also they've just got an enormous passion for what they do, and they put an awful lot of graft into it as well. And yeah, there was me at the beginning of this season, Brittany, thinking that to make drinks, you just poured bits and pieces into a cocktail shaker, shook it up, and hey presto. Mm-hmm. Far from it, as Mark Tubridy has shown, because he is a man who is passionate about the mixing of the perfect cocktail, and he has made it a much more enriching experience for me. That's for sure. Well, look, as if by magic, it's like he knew I was talking about him.
I think it's the perfect. And Haley and Tom, you got to stick with us for this final cocktail. Yeah. You were absolutely right there.
Quick question, Mark, before he makes the cocktail. I hope you guys don't mind. Mark, why is it when I make my martini at home, I can never make it as good as when I go out and get it at a restaurant? It's almost like you get a hot dog at the ballpark. It's much better than the hot dog you make at home. Help me out. I need help.
we spoke about that in one episode. So there's this kind of like mystical kind of aspect, which is that sometimes when someone else makes it for you, it just feels better. It tastes better. I mean, there are things that you can do that can make it incrementally better. Chill your martini glass, make sure you're using the right ice. But I agree with you. I mean, I mentioned at one point in the show that when my wife makes me a Manhattan, mind you, I make hundreds per week, normally, not now. But it always tastes better. So I'm right with you. I think there's something sort of intangible about that. So we both need help. But,
fair enough.
But I did want to toast you. I mean, you guys talking about your family, it is so beautiful. There's so much heart and so much warmth that goes into what you do. I know, Tom, your mom and dad are proud of you. Haley, it's a pleasure to meet you. So I want to cheers you guys. My best attempt at a Sazerac. I know you get better. I'm sure you get better, but I wanted to do this for you. All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
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 I love a Sazerac.
All right. And with that, we'll lead into our final drink of the night. We're pretty much at the end of the show here. But just like the path to finding the perfect recipe for the Garland, the path to finding the perfect recipe for the Tory Cup was a long one. I always knew that drink should be regal because it was inspired by the Tory horse sculpture that's presented to the winners at the Breeders' Cup each year. But again, the original Tory Cup was a little different than the one that we know today. So it still had bourbon and it still had orange juice, but instead of lemonade, it actually had lemon juice. And instead of sweet vermouth, it had apricot liqueur. And if you can believe it, it even had a splash of ginger beer as well. It was a delicious drink, but we had some problems there. So one, the apricot liqueur was a little difficult for certain states and certain tracks to source. And as we know, one of the best things about the Breeders' Cup is that it travels from year to year. So we needed ingredients that were going to be universally accessible from track to track. So that was one thing. The other thing is that little splash of ginger beer at the end, it didn't seem like much when I was coming up with it, but that's a whole other step for the bartenders to do. And when we're talking about thousands of drinks, that time really adds up. Not to mention that little splash of ginger beer, if it's over poured, can cause the drink to become overly sweet. So all these things I had to take into consideration to come down to a very concise recipe, one that anyone could make at the tracks or their houses. And we landed upon the recipe of the Tory Cup that we have today. So I'm going to walk you guys through that. We are going to start out with 1.5 ounces of orange juice. And we're going to follow that with 2 ounces of lemonade. Now, this is another crucial step in coming up with these final recipes. We wanted to make sure that these ingredients, or the recipe rather, was built off of ingredients that you could buy at any store. So you should be able to go out and get Tropicana or Minute Maid, you know, whatever orange juice, and that should work in this cocktail, or you should be able to get a pre-bottled lemonade, and that should work as well. That being said, we're on episode 11 of Cocktails and Conversations. As we mentioned before, you guys have been following with us. I know you've been picking up little things here and there. So there are ways to elevate this cocktail. It's delicious as is, but feel free to squeeze your own orange juice at home. And if you want to make your own lemonade, that's very, very simple too. I mean, every single week I talk about simple syrup and squeezing lemon juice. So you basically have all the ingredients right there. If you're going to do lemonade at home, I would say start with equal parts lemon juice and simple syrup, and then take that total amount and add the same amount of filtered water. That's what's going to make it lemonade as opposed to sour mix. You can always adjust the sweetness after that. So those two things alone will take your cocktail, take your cocktail up to another level. All right, so now we are going to add 3/4 ounce of sweet vermouth. And this was really kind of an aha moment for me when I was coming up with this cocktail, because I was trying to figure out, how do I impart complexity, but at the same time not just add more and more ingredients? And I've actually made, because I'm geeky like this, I've made sweet vermouth at the 21 Club where I work. And so I've seen how many spices and herbs and flavorings go into it, not to mention this beautiful caramel undertone. So that really was this kind of missing ingredient that brought a whole bunch of complexity to the cocktail without making it overly complicated. All right, so we're going to finish up with 1.5 ounces of Maker's Mark bourbon. Of course, we want this for its wonderful vanilla and oak tones, and also it's the real strength. It's the real backbone of the drink. So 1.5 ounces of that as well.
Mark, when do you reckon you'll get back to the 21 Club? What's the deal, do you think?
Yeah, well, you know, at this point, we have entered the second phase of reopening for New York City, which includes outdoor dining. That doesn't work out too well for 21, simply because we're right there on 52nd Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. So it's a major midtown cross street. So I don't think we're going to be doing that. I don't know. The third phase begins July 8th. So that's the first opportunity for indoor dining to resume. And I guess we'll take it from there. So I haven't received word yet, but you guys have definitely kept me sharp in the meantime. So whenever they call me back, I know I'm still going to know how to make a martini for Tom, or, you know, a bourbon sour for Haley. Haley, is it true that you worked in the bourbon industry for a little bit?
Yeah, I worked in PR and for actually really more whiskey, but bourbon, we did have some bourbon clients.
Okay, awesome.
It's thanks to Mark that I've acquired a taste for bourbon now.
Oh, yeah.
It's also thanks to me. I think that Brittany now has a martini glass, a cocktail shaker. We're stocking you up.
They arrived. They finally arrived,
did.
Mark. Yes.
Okay, so for that reason, next week, whatever we do, it's going to be a martini style drink, because I want to see those glasses.
2 weeks, guys. Because I'm in a hotel next week. 2 weeks.
Oh, that's
we'll
true.
do it.
That's true.
Mark is so faithful to the Breeders' Cup, he's going to change his name by deed poll to Maker's Mark Tubridy by the time.
Yes. Hey, listen, Nick, it wouldn't be the first time I've called myself that. All right, I'm going to shake this up.
Stop. Wait, Mark.
Oh,
just wait there.
Accolades. Right.
So here we go.
Okay.
The major, like, this could be wrong because it's Wikipedia. Anything could be wrong on Wikipedia. But we did this with Pletcher. So anything that's good enough for one great trainer is good enough for another. Major racing wins of Tom Amoss. Here we go. Go. Louisiana Handicap, New Orleans Handicap, Cornhusker Handicap, Black Gold Stakes, Diana Stakes, Tacoma Stakes twice, Nakama Stakes, Shaky Town Stakes, Apple Blossom Handicap, Aziri Stakes twice, Fleur de Lis Handicap, Go for One Handicap, Appian Stakes, Prestonwood Distaff Handicap, Stars and Stripes Turf Handicap, Elkhorn Stakes, Safety Cap Stakes, Maker's Mark Mile Stakes, Longines Stakes, Aristodes Breeders' Cup Stakes, Sunderland Derby Sanford Stakes, and the Kentucky Oaks with Serengeti Empress.
Yes.
We might land making another Fleur de Lis, which she last won in 2000. I can't remember who won in 2000.
Good question. I'm 2 drinks in. We'll have to address that in the morning. But I'll tell you this: if you went through Todd Pletcher's achievements while Mark was doing shaking of a drink, I know how Mark got those biceps.
I subbed it down.
Yeah, let me tell you, we've had that workout before. It's kind of crazy. But hey guys,
Heritage
strain our Tory Cup. I like to use a nice fancy glass, so I keep on using this brandy snifter, but you can use any type of goblet, wine glass, or you can use a large old-fashioned glass as well. For garnish, we want to do something nice and festive. Do some seasonal fruit. Here I've got a lemon, orange, and raspberry. I'm going to put that right on top. So this is not the original version, but this is the better version, the one you can get consistently anywhere at any track across the nation or in your own homes. Cheers, guys. That's the Tory Cup.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
That looks stunning.
And who hasn't had one of those at Will Rogers Downs?
Yeah. Who?
Well.
Cheers, Mark.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.
That was awesome. Thank you, Mark.
Awesome.
Now Nick is sprightly. You're awake as we wrap up
I've
our
woken
show.
up. Yeah, it's now 12:30, and
It's 12 o'clock. It's 11:30 there, I believe.
it's 12. It's 12:30.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah.
This has been so special. I know it's a long show, and I love everybody for tuning in, and I love you guys for joining us and just sharing the stories, because this is why the show was created, to be able to sit back and just have great conversation and have Mark make exceptional cocktails. So thank you guys for joining us. This was just a true blast, a real pleasure. Both of you joining us. Daddy-daughter day, it really was.
It was a great day. Thanks for having me.
It was my honor. I really enjoyed it, you guys. Nick, Britt, I really appreciate it.
Not a bit. You guys are fantastic, and thanks to Jeff and Hannah as well for joining us earlier on. Do you know what? Hannah's name nearly just popped out of my head then. Imagine how much trouble I'd have been if I'd actually not just dragged that back from the brink. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been great to kind of get the show up and running again after a little bit of a break. Brittany, we need to tune in at 5:00 Eastern this Saturday on NBC, the main network, for a very special broadcast, not just the Stephen Foster, but perhaps most importantly, the Fleur de Lis and Serengeti Empress, Midnight Bisou earlier. Just leave you with a final word, Tom. Just how are you feeling going into this weekend?
Yeah, so look, my filly loves this racetrack. She's training great. We realize exactly what is ahead of us and what we have to accomplish. But, my first love of racing was the affirmed Alydar rivalry. Alydar's trainer, John Veach, he took it personally. Every time he got beat by affirmed, it was like affirmed had beaten him. I don't feel that way about Midnight Bisou, but I have great pride in my filly. So when she does get beat, it hurts a lot. And, as trainers, you learn to hide it from the public. But I can tell you, she's in that first stall next to my office, and she's my best friend at the racetrack. I love her. And I sure hope she shows her stuff Saturday and gives the world an opportunity to see what she did on Oaks Day is not just an apparition, that she is the real deal.
I mean, Tom, you're a great broadcaster as well as a great trainer, and I mean, our boss at NBC always says, give us a reason to root for these horses, give us a reason to care. Well, you guys and the Blooms earlier have given us and everyone watching a great reason to care about these fabulous fillies that are taking to the track this weekend. Haley, Tom, thanks so much. Thank you guys for watching. That's it for episode
to both
11
all runners.
for sure. Come back safe and run hard. We will see you again next week when more wonderful guests will be joining us. That's it. Thanks for watching. Night.
Thanks, guys.